So welcome everybody, Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University and with our Doctorate in Organization Development and Change program. And our program is a thought leader focused program on developing thought leaders in the areas of transforming organizations, revitalizing communities, and developing human potential. And it's a great group of people. We're in our 5th year. And we have wonderful students that are producing knowledge, sharing it, scaling it. One of the things I like to say is that it's about scaling knowledge like passive income. It's passive difference making. It's making a difference while you sleep. So anytime you can create content that is evidence-based and meaningful and helpful, when you create that and put it out there, people will say, yeah, this is meaningful and helpful to me. And hey, Sarah, hey, take this. And or hey, Herb, here you go. Read this. Have you read this? And then the minute it gets shared is the minute somebody else is being touched by your good work. And so the other thing I say is that people who do this work believe in humanity. Why would we write and create content to help others unless we believe that that people would benefit from it and use it? And so we believe the world is open and willing to learn. We believe the world is looking to find better ways to be together. And our program is all about doing that in a very focused, evidence-based, practical, professional way. And we have great people in our program who are in all fields and places in the world. So I'm super grateful for that in our program. We have different people here. Sarah, who is our producer and puts this together for the program. She is in the doctoral program, and we're really grateful. Thank you, Sarah, for all your work to bring us here today. Supporting us also is Teo, who is also a doctoral student in the program and does a lot of support around this. And then over there, you can see Tom Daniels, who does a lot of work to support our program. So I'm grateful to you as well, Tom, for your support around that. And everybody here has been connected to our program in different ways, lots of students and people. So it's a really a good group, a great community, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Now, Herb is a different story. Herb is a fun friend that I've met professionally, and we are reeling him in. His shirt suggests that we're reeling him in to be a part of our program in different ways, like we do. I'll bring other people in, like Ken and others here, Dave and so forth, to come in and share their wisdom with our community in different ways. And so Herb is here to do that. We've had a couple of good talks, most recently at the Academy of Management. And Herb was talking about a variety of things. And then we talked about, let's do a good webinar podcast on something really interesting. And what's those of you that don't know about the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's an interesting name. Or I would say it's kind of it's an undescriptive name of something that's really cool, right? You have no idea what it is when you hear it, but it's really very interesting. And I think Herb, your application of this in the way you are going to be talking about today is awesome. And I think your skill set, your experience, your breadth and depth in the field of OD&C, as well as in academia and teaching and so forth. We're really fortunate to have you here today. So, Herb, could you take a few minutes to just share with a little bit about yourself that you would like us to know about you? We can read about you out there on the internet. What would you like us to know? And what journey are you going to take us on today?
Okay. Well, I spent 30 years in business before going back to school when I was 57 to earn a doctorate. And so all of my work is really, I was a CFO controller of some smaller companies, no one you ever heard of. So all the work I do really focuses on practice. I want to be able to go and say to some executive, here's some things you can do to improve your organization. So I'm much more focused on the practical side of what and you're going to see that as we go through this, what we have today. I'll tell you a little bit about Polk State, a little bit about where we came from, how we arrived at the model and the things that we have. And then I thought I'd share some of the results. We did a study. And then at the end, here's some of our interpretations. And then I'd like to open it up to see, get a wider view. Maybe there are other ways of looking at this than what we've seen. Does that make sense, Steve? Good way to go. Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen and go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to be also introducing you to another gentleman named Lucas Michel, who lives in Switzerland. He is actually the originator of this model we're going to be talking about. And he's a very prolific writer. He has, I don't know, a bunch of books out there that you can go and look at. And it makes my one kind of small in comparison. Okay. But there's a lot of information available on what we're doing if in addition to some papers that we've written. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Share. And go here. Okay. I'm with Polk State College here in Florida. And a little bit about Polk State. No one ever heard of it. I'm sure none of you ever have. Polk State is one of 28 state colleges in Florida that were junior colleges for 50 years. And in 2010, the state allowed the junior colleges to begin offering a limited number of bachelor's degrees in areas, disciplines that were needed by the local community, workforce development. So Polk State now offers 5 bachelor's degrees, nursing, elementary education, business is another one of them. And of 12,000 students or so, only about 1,400 are in the bachelor's programs. Our average age is 33. And we don't have any master's or PhD programs. We're totally focused on helping our students in their careers. And I have no requirement to do any research. I do it because I enjoy it. And then I incorporate new ideas into my classes that gives them an advantage in the workplace. And that's working out pretty well. And Lucas Michel is in Switzerland. Okay. Okay, so the Dunning-Kruger effect, to what Steve mentioned, it's a bias where people with low ability tend to overestimate their own abilities. And as an executive in many companies, I didn't know the name of it, but I saw this many times where managers thought they were all that, but they really were uninformed. Okay, so we develop this overconfidence and we make decisions. We don't even really know what we don't know. Okay, we all know that you've probably all heard the term VUCA, and we live in this world that's changing rapidly, and we believe that the ability to adapt and change is absolutely critical in this century. And we've developed this model and a diagnostic instrument that can provide insight into many what we call unseen and rarely discussed dimensions of the culture, leadership, and system. Okay. Now, I've asked Joe, who's a colleague of mine here at Polk State, if we have questions, number one, feel free to jump in and ask. Number two, if you want to pop that in the question, then he's going to jot them down and let me know later on. So here's our research question that we got into. I love these 2 comments. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge, Charles Darwin. And the other one is, in the modern world, the stupid are cocksure while the intelligent are full of doubt. I just think those are perfect descriptions of the Dunning-Kruger effect. So our question is, how does the bias affect organizational agility? Is there a difference between executives in these things that they're thinking and what employees, workers are thinking? And if there is a difference, how does that affect the abilities, organizational agility, or the ability to adapt and change? Okay. So I need to tell you a little bit about the model, first of all. And I put a note in here. If anybody wants more information, you can just email me at hnold@polk.edu, and I'll be glad to give you, a whole wealth of information about it. But the model we've evolved over the last 15 or so years really describes we call it a dynamic system of culture, leadership, and systems. Now, we talk about systems, we're not talking about IT systems. We're talking about the routines, the rules, the boundaries that really form the behaviors that form the whole system as well. And that system is driven by people through their purpose, relationships, and collaboration. And if you do it right, you'll be successful. Okay. We've now worked with over 400 organizations worldwide. So during this time, we have accumulated a very large data set that allows us to slice and dice and look at things in different ways. Okay. In this case, we're looking at the difference between executives and workers. Later on this year, we have another book coming out that we're looking at what patterns do different companies display at different stages in their growth. And we validated the instrument. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing here. We won't have time. Okay. But this is how it's constructed. Okay. And let's see if I can do this. Okay. So when we started off, we didn't want to use things like for success that were like earnings per share and that kind of thing. So through time, we said, you know what? We want to look for the underlying actions. And if you take these, you're probably going to be successful. So like if you're responsive to your customers, are your people aligned? Do you have the right capabilities? Are your people motivated? And are they allowed to use their creativity? So together we said, you know what? If you're doing those things, you're probably going to be successful, whether you're a government, whether you're a university, whether you're Apple or anybody else. I can only see a few people. Does that make sense, Dave? Okay. So under each of the main dimensions, we have these underlying, we call them elements. And I'm not going to go through each of them. I'll point out just a couple. Like under leadership, we have this one we call risk dialogue. And it turns out in most of our work, that turns out to be really a strong one because it's a measure of the willingness of the organization to accept risk. And anytime you're going through a change, there's a risk that it won't work. And so if you have a low tolerance for risk, that exists in people's minds, that acts as a brake against change. So this is an example of the kinds of things we're looking for. And under people, okay, we have this right here, okay? And this, what emerge later on is pretty important, okay? We looked at people. Do you have an environment that allows people to focus their attention on doing what they want, on doing the things that add value? Or do you have interferences? Are people aware of what's going on around them so they can make intelligent decisions, maybe with dealing with a customer? This one is particularly important. What's the level of trust? Do I trust my managers? Do I trust my coworkers? Do I trust myself? And the last one we call is just choice. Do I have the freedom of choice to select the best way with dealing with a situation? Make sense, everybody? Sarah? Okay, so that's kind of the way it's constructed, and we'll see this as we go along. And so what happens is we can collect data points all through here. We can roll them up so I can get a total amount for resilience and people, and then I can actually roll those up to get a score for the whole company. And we've actually emerged, we have actually developed a thing called the Agile Maturity Scale. And we can look at companies and say, kind of, where are you in terms of developing these capabilities? Okay, we can look at the total organization. Clear that. Get rid of there. Okay, so for the purpose of this study, we took 374 organizations. We now have over 400, but at that time we only had 374. And our diagnostic, it's a Likert scale, a 7-point Likert scale that we use. But when we're working with CEOs, we found out very early on that they're not really that bright. And so we convert everything to a 100-point scale, and people can relate to that. Does that make sense? Like the Celsius scale. And so what we did, we segregated out the top executives in organizations, and we compared that to all the other people and see if there's a difference. Okay. And here's just a breakdown of some of the demographics. We don't have demographics by like male and female and that type of thing, but we did it by company. So you can see that we have I think, a fairly representative sample of different kinds of companies, different industries, and all of that. Large companies, small companies. Most of them are in Europe, but the rest is, I think, pretty representative. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the results. Okay, so this is the very top level. Remember on the chart, the very top level. So executives and workers, executives had a higher opinion of themselves, and it was statistically significant. And when you break down to the major dimensions, the same pattern emerges, that the executives, I think they have better capabilities than the everyday workers. And the largest gaps are down here in people and resilience, in the things that involve working with people. Okay. The next one we did, we said, I'm going to take the 27 elements, because these are the means averaged up. Take the 27 elements and just run analysis of those. And you can see it came out to be, significant. There was a pretty big gap, but trust popped out as the single most powerful influence on all of them. And if you think about it, it makes perfectly good sense. I explain this to my students. I tell them, if we're talking about sharing knowledge and sharing what you know, if Sarah, if you don't trust me, you're not going to share what you know. And immediately the learning stops. And the collaboration stops, and everything else. So trust popped out as really, really significant. Are we good so far? Dave, Carol?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, if we dig down to this is the success dimension. Okay, this is success. And here were the elements of success. And here again, we see that the executives think that, yeah, we've got everything we need to be successful, but the employees, not so much. They're saying, oh, wait a minute there, big boy. We don't really agree with that. Okay. And it was significant. All right. If we look at the culture, And these are the elements of culture: understanding intent. Do we all have a common intent, agenda? Are we all trying to achieve the same things? We have similar aspirations. Okay. And here again, there's a pretty big discrepancy, okay, between the two groups. And the largest one is in aspirations. Okay. Do we share the same aspirations or personal goals? And it's also significant. Okay. When I get to the leadership dimension and systems, we get a little bit different picture. Okay. We got some here, that they actually were pretty close. Okay. Except in risk dialogue. Okay. The executives seemingly were willing to take more risk than the workers, which I found that to be a bit surprising. I really kind of expected it to be the other way around. Okay. On systems, okay, do I get the right information? Do my systems give me the right information, helps me form strategy? Are they implemented well? Do they promote, support the different beliefs of the organization? And boundaries popped out, okay, as that and this. Now, boundaries are, do the systems give you an adequate range so that you can make decisions? Do they provide the information? Do the rules around it give you people enough range to make decisions? And the strategy part is, do the systems give you the information that helps you to form strategy? And we can see a pretty big gap there. The executives are thinking, oh yeah, our strategy is working. We got all the information we need to make informed decisions, but the workers they probably see poor decisions and they're questioning that. Yeah, I'm going to skip down a little bit, get some different people showing up here on my side. Okay, I see Dave, I see Ken. Okay. Oh, Maria Lahosky, Maria right there, she's at Polk State too. She's my boss. I don't know why I invited her, but yeah, she's my boss. Okay, we get to the next one. Okay, the people dimension. And here's where we see some really large gaps, okay, between the two groups. Okay, right here. Awareness. Awareness is, am I aware of the things around me so that I can make an intelligent decision dealing with a situation? Choice is, do I have the freedom to choose from different options to go off and deal with a customer, for example? Okay, so the executives think, oh yeah, we're giving people plenty of room to operate. The employees are saying, no, we don't. You have rules and regulations that are constraining us from being able to do our work. And you have things that are causing us to lose focus, that are interfering with our ability to do our work. And when I look at the resilience dimension, which is collaboration, purpose, do I have healthy relationships? We are not collaborating. The executives think we all share a common purpose and we're all collaborating and working together. Great. But the workers, again, are saying, hold on, not so fast. We're really not working very well together. And these were significant. Okay, so we get down to here's kind of the way we interpreted this. There were definite gaps between the executives. Okay. The greatest gaps are in the people and resilience dimensions, with trust as the most influential. Okay. And this is where you're going to get power that drives your, this is where you're going to get all your new ideas. This is where all the problem solving is going to take place, is through collaboration and people trusting each other. Okay. We kind of came to the conclusion that traditionally trained executives really create an environment that inhibits, okay, I'm not doing this very good, inhibits the flow of knowledge. When we create hierarchies and then we get these silos, they end up interfering with the flow of knowledge, which holds back your ability to adapt and change, because you're not getting any ideas on how to go off and do it. Dave, does that make sense? Okay. People are not able to use their creative potential. It's another one of the things we got out of this. Okay. Success in culture explains why initiatives fail. Executives think that the organization has all the capabilities to succeed. Employees do not believe that. And I love this Peter Drucker quote, and I think that this, this kind of supports that.
Yeah, Herb, a couple of questions that were popping up, and
Okay.
it would be great to pause for a second to take a
Sure.
look at some of this.
Yeah, I was looking at that. I was just waiting to see if we're gonna have a quick Q&A or
Perfect.
if,
Okay.
Yeah.
all right. So we got a few questions here. The first one we have is from Brittany, and she is saying, or she says, I would have really loved to see these results by gender. And she's curious if there is any significant difference in the results, I assume, between gender.
No, we didn't collect that. I said we didn't collect that demographic. We were just looking at companies.
Okay. The next question is from Tammy, and she's asking, is this United States only data, and have you done any breakout of results by industry sector?
Here's the different companies. We have done breakouts by sectors. It's not a part of this study, but yes, we have. In our agile, Sammy Spam. In our other work, we have done that, yes. And we have this thing called the Agile Maturity Scale, and we have broken that down by sectors. And we've done a report 3 times where we looked at different sectors, and it's actually posted on the Agility the Management Insights website, which I should have you can find it. I should have put it on here somewhere, but it's the Management Insights website. We do have a study that we did by sector. It's not included in this particular one. Did that answer that question? Okay. Any more questions?
Tammy, yeah, I've got a few. I was just waiting to see if Tammy was going to respond.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Our next project that we're working on is looking at the life cycle. And that's where we're going to have a book. It's called Organizational Transitions. It's coming out. And we looked at we used the Greiner model. And we said, okay, do companies have different patterns within this, okay, at different stages in their life cycle? And we did that analysis, and yes, they did have patterns. And so the book is coming out later on. The idea is if you're at the creativity stage and you want to go to the next stage, here are some things you should be aware of, and you can probably start planning today to prepare yourself for to jump to the next level. Yeah, each one of these could be a whole different study. We can take the data and slice it and dice it anywhere we want. Next question.
Yeah, Sarah has a question here that she noted that most of the companies are located in Europe. So
Right.
she's curious if there are any cultural influences that impact the findings.
Well, there actually could be. And that's one thing that we want to go do later on. Certainly Africa and Asia could have difference, cultural influences, but we haven't gotten to that level yet.
Yeah, Nicole has a similar couple questions related to culture. Yeah, since the survey was on European countries or organizations, how does the country culture influence the organizational culture? And then the follow-up to that was, were the surveys taken only by the executive and workers on the beliefs for themselves, or in other words, did the workers evaluate the administrators and vice versa?
Okay, it's formatted so that the executives are being asked to evaluate their organization, the people under them. The workers' questions, same construct, but they're asked to evaluate within their work group, the people that they work with every day. If that makes sense. So we get a perception. The idea is we want to see what the executives think of their organization and what the workers think of the people that they work with every day, which actually drive they're actually doing the work. Another question?
Yeah, Carol just had a comment. She mentioned that also male-female differences as well as age would be interesting. So that may be something in future studies that you may want to look at as far as, is there a difference between the genders when it comes to, these particular aspects that you're measuring?
Yeah,
And
we
then,
did do that in some, but not all. So,
Mm.
We all had a partial set. It wasn't a complete set, so we kind of excluded that from here. That's something we can go back, another time and sort on that, and and focus on that maybe. But that wasn't a part of this one.
Now, Nicole has a follow-up question to her original one regarding the workers evaluating the administrators and vice versa. On follow-up to that question, she's asking, then how do you see the Dunning-Kruger effect?
It's the executives are thinking one thing, like you can go down to, you can go right to here. Okay, the measures of success. Oh, for God's sakes. The executives are thinking, hey, we've got all the capabilities and everything we need to be successful within our organization. The people who are doing the work are saying, no, we don't. We don't have the right tools. We don't have the right capabilities. Okay. And so that's how we're looking at the difference between the perceptions of the two groups.
Yeah, if I could add into Herb, it's an interesting twist to look at the Dunning-Kruger effect on this. And I'd be curious about your thoughts on this. So the effect, simply stated, just to remind everybody, that it's people with limited competence in like a particular area or domain, they overestimate their abilities in that situation, right? So in the situations, they also relate it to high performers and the tendency to underestimate their skills. So now if we look at what you're saying here, you got managers who are making some judgments about some things in which really the people doing the jobs, the whole notion in our field of organizational development is that the wisdom is in the workers, it's in the system. And
Right.
Too often leaders come in with this idea that they have to have answers to all the questions, right? Leaders come in and think they have to know it all, or else if they don't know it all, they're going to be judged as they're not doing their job.
Correct.
So in some ways, that whole notion, I think, is directly related to the Dunning-Kruger effect and and how it causes bias in a variety of situations in which a leader may not recognize the need to understand the expertise of those people are following. Which now you take the high performers in your team, right? Now think about this: you have to have all the answers as a leader. You walk into a situation, and in your team you have some high performers. you're going to overestimate your ability to answer that question, and they're going to underestimate their ability to answer the question.
Right.
Now what happens about in terms of making good decisions in a moment? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it creates like another interference. I mean, yeah, if the executives, anytime the executives are thinking they're not going to be able to get support for any kind of a change effort they're doing, because the people in the back of their mind that are doing it are going to be thinking, is it really going to work, or do I really? Yeah. Does that make sense, Steve? Trying to.
Yes, it does. And think about the notion, what you said earlier around how leaders create structure that limits the flow of information.
Right.
Now you look at the whole structure of organizations currently, and in your talk and in your title, you talked about the, you alluded to the importance of structure, organizational structure, and creating more agile organizations, which would suggest agility needs people to use information better. Right. Now you got this problem where there's structures that inhibit the people who need it to make good decisions. You got them underestimating their ability, leaders overestimating their ability, which reinforces creating more structures.
Correct.
And what does structure do?
That's the natural response. I want to create more structure.
Right. Because
I want to have more rules. I want to have more processes, which ends up being counterproductive.
Right.
To the ability to adapt and change.
Right on. And that influences stress, because stress is directly related to control. The more control I feel I have, the less stress I have. So now what you have happening is, if things get stressful, what's going to happen? What's the fallback? You drop out of your executive function and your brain thinking, drop back to the fear-based management, which is create more structure, create more control, have the answer. So in agile environments, it's particularly problematic, because if you want to create an agile organization, leaders have to do something different than what they've been traditionally doing all along.
Exactly. And to me, that's why this part right here is particularly significant. Okay. Because we're talking about, are the people around you aware so they can make good decisions? Okay. The executives are thinking, oh, we've created processes that work just fine, but the workers are saying, nope, I'm not able to focus my attention on doing my job. All these processes are interfering with my ability to actually use my own capabilities. Okay. And when you look at, trust and choice, I mean, those are pretty wide gaps. Okay. I don't trust the people I work with. And yet the managers are thinking, oh yeah, everything is just fine. And as I said earlier, no one's going to walk into the CEO's office and say, hey, I don't trust Dave. Me? Yeah, no one's ever going to do that. And we all know how it works. The first day you start somewhere, people pull you at the side and they say, hey, here's the way we really do things around here. Don't tell Bob if you have a good idea, because he'll steal it and call it his own. And the executives will never know that.
Could you relate what you just said to the data you collected, which comes from the perspective of the executives, and how that might affect the results here? Like, what you collected the data from the perception of the executives. How might what you just said affect that, as opposed to having the data from executives and the workers? Can you talk a little bit about that? And that was brought up, I think, somewhere along the way in the discussion.
Okay. I would look at like collaboration. The questions are, do we work well together? Do we collaborate to solve problems? Executives are going along fat, dumb, and happy, thinking, oh, maybe I've got quality circles, or I've got committees step, or teams stepped up, and they're all collaborating really well and coming up with creative answers. So they're thinking, hey, everything is pretty good. I'm getting the best out of my people. But the workers who are actually doing the work, they're they're not collaborating as much. They're not sharing what they know, which limits your ability to come up with solutions. Does that make sense, Steve? Does that answer that question?
It gets at it. I think the point is when the survey, if you go back to the data collected, it was collected from the perspective of who answered the surveys.
Well, you have two groups.
Okay.
Okay, you have the executives,
Answering the survey.
and then you have workers, everybody else.
Right.
So, yeah, we
So
went
it is,
through it. It was like,
so it is from the two perspectives of the group. And it's a
Correct.
self-assessment and perception of the two groups. I'm just kind of going back to the basics. I think
yeah,
some of
no,
the
you're right.
questions
That's
around that.
exactly what it is. We want to talk about perceptions and self-assessments. Yes, that's exactly right. Yep.
Right. So in that, what you're seeing is that the workers are underestimating their knowledge of and their abilities, and the
Right.
executives are overestimating theirs.
Correct.
And in the Dunning-Kruger effect, who has the most competence over the work in and of itself? The worker.
The worker.
Right.
Yeah, always.
So what's happening is you're seeing it come out right here in terms of the executives think they have all the answers, or
Right.
they are more competent and they know more than the workers know, which feeds into that philosophy of creating more structure because I got to control everybody because
Right.
they're not as competent. And the
Right.
workers are actually underestimating their competence, which the Dunning-Kruger effect says you will do. Because it says those with the competence will underestimate, those without the competence will overestimate.
Correct.
And then it feeds right into creating structured environments where you control workers who aren't smart enough to do it like their managers are, because managers are the smartest ones in the room as far as they're concerned.
Exactly. Yeah, and they believe that they're getting the most out of their people by doing
Right.
so.
Right. And Tom is giving us a big, ooh, like, wow. So yeah. So I think, so Nicole, for you, for example, is that making sense to you there? Yeah. So one of the other things in this is the executive function and the structure of organizations in which work and processes tend to be structured. And I'd love for you to kind of kick this, because this goes in the direction of, because we're getting close to wrapping up, but I think this gets at the effect of the Dunning-Kruger on agile systems, which is agile systems need to be elegant, simply, concisely focused on the workers having a lot of nimble ability to adjust and change on the fly what is happening. Yep. Agile allows for that. So this Dunning-Kruger effect works right against agile. So so my thought is, understanding the problem is one thing, but what is your solution in that connection?
Actually, yeah, that's what I flipped down to here, because we have all the stuff that we've come out that have those kinds of ideas in them. What we do is we come in and we say, you need to, number one, we need to change the way we think. Yeah, we need to treat people as self-responsible individuals, which is totally opposite of of adding all this structure. Okay. We need to have confidence and trust that people can make good decisions if they're given the right tools. And I think that managers, leaders, it's a different way of thinking because of ego. I have to feel like I'm in charge. We'll even create reward systems that reinforce that. Okay, so they're going to create maybe short-term goals and objectives, so people become focused on hitting a goal instead of actually doing what's right and adding value to the organization. So, I think that the first step is to really get kind of going back to McGregor's, theory X, theory Y. We need to get people to look at people's human nature under a theory Y, and then you create your structure around that. The people are self-responsible. They want to do a good job. They are smart enough. They need minimal amounts of structure. We have to have some, but the boundaries need to be wide enough to give people freedom of choice. In a
Right.
lot of our writing, we say that people don't have freedom of choice unless they can say no. They have
Right.
to be able to go to the boss and say, boss, this is not a good idea.
Right. And that goes to some of the more recent concepts around speaking truth to power. And it doesn't mean being disrespectful and speaking truth to power, but it's actually being brave enough to say and share what needs to be said and do it in constructive ways. And then the
I think
theory X theory,
Dave had to comment.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, I
right?
didn't mean to interrupt Steve. No, it just, as I was listening, I come back to that element that has the word risk hyphenated in it. What was the first word?
Risk dialogue
Risk
is what
dialogue.
we call it. Yeah.
And it seems to me that of all the things here, which is pretty damn impressive, that when we come in as external support or even internal consultants, we get right to how much people are willing to be open to
Mhm.
us and with each other, and what are they risking when they speak truth.
Mhm.
And then you brought truth in as one of the most significant variables of all. So I think this. Well, let me open up to a quick question. If I were going in as an OD consultant, and one of these companies had a data set that specific to that company, and just the way you've laid it out, would this make me more effective in helping them to know
Our
all these
experience is
data?
absolutely yes. And I'll give you a perfect example, Dave, concerning risk dialogue. We had a client in Mexico. Okay, they had actually it's the largest. I think it's Pepsi bottling companies in Central and South America. They operate in 6 countries. They got a new executive, new CEO, and they were losing market share. They're having all kinds of safety problems. People were like texting and while they were driving their trucks
Oh, gee.
and things like that. And they hired the CEO hired several consultants to come in and got nowhere. And so we have a guy we work with in Mexico City came in. He gave this diagnostic to the top. I think it was the top 3 people in each of the countries. Like so, you had like 18 people, maybe 24 in total. I think was all it was. Then we will do a workshop and go down and say, here's the results. And then we don't tell them what the problem is. We kind of let them figure out, based on the results, this is what it's saying. And it turned out in that one, risk dialogue was really high. I should say it was really low. They didn't want to take risks. And it turned out in the discussions that these executives had it in their minds that if they tried something new and it failed, that they would be fired.
Yeah.
And so obviously nothing was ever going to work.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's where it's the gotcha culture. And if you go back to your point about a culture eats strategy for breakfast, if you create
Right.
that culture, what does it do for the strategy that they're trying to implement when they create a culture that's going to eat their strategy, which is a gotcha culture?
Right.
Yeah.
And so our advice was, you need to probably spend a year or 2 years changing that mindset, encourage guys to go off and take a risk. If it doesn't work, give them a raise anyway.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to, for making the effort, you're going to have to change that mindset, that perception within the minds of your executives. And probably it goes all the way top to bottom.
You said
We only
something.
look for
You said something, Herbert, really important. It's small, but really important. And I think you need to unpack it just a little bit as we go to wrap up. Give them the raise anyway.
Yeah.
Right. You said that. So now that is important to unpack a little bit from the perspective of what are you giving them the raise for? And how do you ensure that the raise creates a more capable, agile environment? I have thoughts on that. I'm just curious, how does that relate? How do you do that in a way that ensures you're advancing the competence of the environment for people to do better work?
Well, the idea, and actually in agile strategies, we go through with some specific suggestions. Okay. But in that case, The idea is I use the term celebrate failure. Encourage people to try. If it doesn't work, somehow you go back and say it's perfectly okay. You know, it's not going to impact maybe your raise at the end of the year. The important thing is you made the effort, you gave it a good faith effort, you tried it, and you know, if it doesn't work, fine. But you've got to get in that mindset that people so they don't have that fear. There was years ago when I first got into business, I worked at Texas Instruments, and I had a guy who I worked for was our division controller at the time, and for a couple of years he would come in. I got kind of the reputation as the problem solver, the troubleshooter, and my interviews would start out something like this. They'd say, I've got 50 people in this organization. 49 of them came to work every day. They did a good job and they went home. I got one who has all these ideas. Okay. And and not all of them worked, but this one worked. This one worked. That's great.
So differentiate failure or mistakes, careless versus smart. What is your way of giving advice on how to reward people for failing when it's an appropriate failure versus an inappropriate failure?
I would say if they, as long as the decisions they made along the way seem reasonable, under the conditions, you made a reasonable decision on whatever it is project you're working on, based on the information you had, the logic behind it seems sound, then I would say you did a good job.
And what I would offer is that as people start moving into this new arena with AI taking over a lot of the low-hanging fruit decision-making and information, that we've got to teach people how to be better at critical thinking. And there are specific models and approaches that are easy to understand. So that's where training and development comes in. Teaching people how to use specific critical thinking tools to first make the decision and be able to explain it from a critical thinking lens, checking my assumptions, using data, and being able to explain the result. Now then, after it happens, what did you learn from it? Because I will, without a doubt, encourage somebody that can explain what they did, how it went into it with a thoughtful or intentional, we call it about intentional interventions, right? Intentional change with an intentional, thoughtful approach to what we did. I can explain it. And then afterwards I can debrief it doing, after action review or other types of, debriefs on it afterwards. How does Agile build in the upfront thinking and the post thinking after an event so that it enables this? How does Agile do that?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer to that one. maybe there's some more smarter people out here than me.
Well, I think what happens is, if I may offer to you, in your stuff, what I think is when you look at the process of Agile up front has very specific steps. The steps are on how groups come together, form their contracting for how they're going to work together. Then it has very specific steps on how you develop and get data, design your prototypes, test your prototypes, and they call them minimum viable products and those kinds of things. But they create conditions to try, like a minimum viable product is one that we know is potentially going to be flawed, but it's meeting the minimum viable requirements. So and so if someone just walks in and just tries something, right? And then they fail miserably and people die. And they said, well, hey, Herb, you said, hey, I should try it. It's okay. Give me my bonus. But you got to go back. Agile provides a very prescriptive, simple process for ensuring that you form your team, utilize data, make a decision, and implement that where you're iteratively or checking in quickly and iteratively real time. So you're not like start it, implement it, and then meet at the end to see what happened. You actually, while in process, changing it, tweaking it, and using all the different types of meetings, it lays it all out so that when you get it going, if there's a problem on the journey, Billy Aubin said something really great. She said, the best plans are meant to be deviated from. And what that means is agile enables to create plans that provide structure, but also enable people to be involved in the deviations. And then at the end, it pauses and gets you an opportunity to reflect on it, to what goes into the knowledge management base, or the knowledge base for future projects.
And I think that even if you, as long as you can show you've been logical, you went through these steps, you made, decisions based on evidence, and they were logical. I would say then the important thing is, if it doesn't work, what do we learn from it? Because the problem would still be, if you're trying to solve a problem, the problem's still there. So if you tried something and it didn't work, now the question is, what do we learn from this? How do we fix this the second time? Let's just try another approach.
Yeah. And Jose, thanks for watching the chat. I saw one in there. Did you want to, because Ken's from a total different time zone, being here in the middle of the night, did you want to maybe bring Ken's question in, I think, as we wrap up, because we're getting to a wrap up?
Okay, I'm looking at, Ken says, thanks, Herbert. There are many interesting points. Here's one of my curiosity about the data. The only trust score in both goes beyond 70 points. Can you tell men about the story? Or me, that's what you meant, me, about the story. Why did they believe they trust one another?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Why?
I guess he's wondering if he's trying to ask, why do you believe they don't trust? They don't have trust for one another.
Well, that's the construct we're looking at, and we asked. And I don't have the details of the questions obviously here, okay? But the questions are structured around, do I trust the people I work with to make decisions? Would I take action based on a recommendation by someone else? In other words, I have to trust that person to give me good advice. Those types of things. Does that make sense, Ken?
Yeah, I think so. Well, Herb and Jose, thanks for being here. We're now at the top of the hour. Herb, love to dive in some more. I love that this has sparked so many cool ideas, particularly with the new age that we're entering with AI and all of that stuff. And this is really important. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks to everybody here who chimed in and contributed to the conversation. I'm really grateful for that. A lot of great chat on there. Thanks, Jose, for supporting Herb in this process. I'm grateful, and Teo and others who are here, and Sarah, who had to leave. So have a great rest of the day, and bye for now.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for giving me the chance, the opportunity.
Awesome. It was wonderful,
Okay.
Herb. More to come. Let's do more.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.